This is really the same chart as Rhonda's, just drawn from the top down. So it's essentially showing that, you know, the gap is the distance between, the volumetric distance between the historic water use and where the sustainable diversion limits land in the final basin plan. And with a measured approach through the next 7 years of delivery of the infrastructure programs and the water buyback, to landing at a point where basically the remaining entitlements in extractive use are the allowable entitlements under the basin plan. So for those irrigators, there's no reduction. It's taken some time, I have to say, on the road with Rhonda over the last few months to really have people understand that there will be no compulsory acquisition, that the government's commitment to bridge the gap is absolutely directed at making sure that well, it's a commitment not to have compulsory acquisition, and it's a commitment to mean that there's no loss in the water value of their licences. So the SDLs are expected to enter into force in 2019, and by that time we will have bridged the gap through the delivery of these programs. Overall, though, it's a steady and cautious approach to how we do this, because the SDLs are not yet final, and so we don't want to overshoot in catchments in terms of recovering too much water. A rule of thumb essentially is sort of half by half, so if there's an amount remaining to recover in a catchment, to seek to have recovered around half of that by 2015 is a conservative approach, but it does provide for that measured adjustment to the change in water availability that Rhonda was speaking of, which really provides the best process of adjustment for the communities. Some things that we're working on in terms of, well, first of all, the commitment to prioritise infrastructure spending is real. The expenditure over the next few years on infrastructure is substantially more than that is on the books for buyback. In fact, the annual volume of buyback in cash terms will fall to around half what it has been before. So if you're just looking in terms of just straight expenditure, whereas infrastructure, now that the big projects are under contract and are ramping up, the outlays for infrastructure are really going to be quite significant in each year. For the buyback itself, it's looking at targeted purchasing, focusing the buyback in terms of looking to see what is going to come in from infrastructure, what's left to bring in, and focusing that in the catchments where there are substantial gaps to bridge. And looking, the water purchase program is set clearly in the market context, in the context of prevailing prices. And the other thing that comes up a lot in conversation around the basin is the mix of entitlements. It's really looking for a balanced portfolio of entitlements that in general will be a reasonable cross-section of the entitlement base in the catchment that is in irrigation hands, with a bias towards higher reliability entitlements, but also reflecting what is actually in the water market in those catchments. So if it's a New South Wales catchment where the bulk of the entitlement is general security, the bulk of our holdings will be general security. Whereas in Victoria, where you've just got high reliability water shares and low reliability water shares, the balance will be different. This graph just is a snapshot as at 31st of January as to where we're actually up to in terms of recovery. In the draft basin plan, the recovery needs are articulated in two forms. One is the in-stream requirement to meet the in-stream environmental needs, and the other is what's called a shared reduction or downstream needs. And this is, for the southern connected system, is a substantial figure. It's about 970 gigalitres. So you can see there the dark blue bar is how far we are in recovering the in-stream requirements, and then we're only a small way into the task of the downstream needs. Likewise, although the colours seem to be around the other way, likewise in the northern basin, but the task is more modest there in both gigalitre terms, and but there's still a way to go in terms of recovering the, if 2750 ends up being the final SDLs, the dark blue bars there is what's still to go. So just coming back to to the task with the infrastructure programs, because there's a very large focus now on what exactly is going to happen from these, how much water will you recover from each and every project across the basin. And the spotlight's on that water saving equation. Often it boils down to what's called a market multiple, which is if you could have bought that water on the open market, compare it to the price of the project, is it 2, 3, 4 times the market price of water that you're going to end up spending to get that water back? Probably the most cost-effective projects in the infrastructure space are the on-farm projects, and they may become even more so depending on how we structure those projects in the future. But some things that we're looking at very closely, working with irrigation bodies and others, is looking at how we integrate better the infrastructure program and the water buyback, looking at how we have water sales that are closely associated with system reconfiguration, so assisting irrigation bodies to adjust their footprint at the same time as acquiring water sales off channels that are going to be closed and decommissioned. We're also very keen to avoid investing in areas that are going to be, that may not later have supply. So we don't want to invest in stranded assets. And one of the requirements of the on-farm program is that the individual farms need to have assured supply into the future for us to be investing in new equipment on their farms. We're also, through this process, building a lot of local knowledge and capacity and actually rolling out these projects. There's a lot of local investment while the projects are going in, but also the delivery bodies themselves are building skills and working with the local irrigators and the irrigation corporations to do this. As with all infrastructure projects, there's major challenges in most things that are legal slow the project down. That is weather, adverse weather conditions, everything from extended time for environmental approvals, whatever it is, it's a constant challenge to help work with all the delivery partners, managing milestones, keeping the projects moving as fast as we can, but being in reality when there are things that are inevitably causing projects to go slower than had been expected. And the current wet weather is a classic example. So just last slide for the time being. The challenges that we're managing into the future for this program, really it's achieving the expected water savings. It's all very well to do the giant technical assessments of these projects, but the water savings need to be real, and so it's tracking that it's working. The water savings are often shared 50-50 between us and the proponents, so it's making sure that that really does happen and that the water savings come in to bridge the gap. It's working with such a wide array of delivery partners, some of whom are quite high maintenance and others are really very professional and easy to work with in how the projects roll out. The other thing that's coming up is that as things evolve in the basin, not just in water world, but in terms of commodities and agricultural developments across the basin, it needs to be adaptive. For the very large projects, you need to reset or to be stopping to review at key points in the project to see, is that the system build that we still want to do? And us working with the major project partners to ensure that the project continues to be set in the real world of what is the local agricultural future and water availability. And everyone's focused on what to do with the remaining SWEPI funds. The current often mentioned favourite is to spend it on environmental works and measures to assist in either offsetting or reducing SDLs. And that's probably the number one in terms of people's expectations, but there are strong candidates in all directions. The other one that's often put forward is just to spend more on on-farm works because the water returns are secure, they're good value compared with some of the larger refits, and they're a win in terms of positioning farmers for a more viable future, including just allowing as well as them retaining a share of water for production, for increased production, the increased productivity from the technology change is proving to be greater than we had expected. So there's very happy results from the first rounds of the on-farm program with a win for the farmers and a win in terms of water recovery to bridge the gap. So I'll leave it there. Oh, that's the website if you want to write it down, if you want to find the updated tables each month on how the water recovery is going.